Well, hello again. I suppose I had to make a comment or two on this, really, didn't I? This is the live Congress holds UFO hearing. That's on News Nation. I'll leave a link to this video below. And it's I can't remember what it's called now. The Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, and they're going to discuss UAPs. UFOs. Now, because I was painting the wall, I was actually listening to this video rather than watching it, and it got to the end before I got down off the step ladder and came over to stop the computer. So right at the end, I thought this was rather interesting. So they've adjourned, okay, they've adjourned for the day. So if you look at the timestamp, it's 1:25:36, it's right at the end of the video. There's a couple of mic checks that I thought were quite interesting.
Member mic check. Member mic check.
So there she is, checking the audio level for the members that are going to be presenting. Sounds like the Norman Collier Appreciation Society, doesn't it? And if we just wait a couple of...
1, 2, test.
There it comes. Any second now.
Witness mic check 1. Witness mic check 1.
And there we go. Witness mic check 1. Witness mic check 1. Now that's interesting because in the open session we didn't hear from any witnesses at all. So in the closed session they're going to have witnesses presenting some testimony. I just thought that was rather interesting. Okay, so now let's just have a look at what they have to say about it. Yeah, I think this bit's quite interesting.
Concerning ourselves with the safety of our personnel, the safety of our installations and bases, there's no other higher priority than what we have than actually getting after this. And as you had stated, we have been assigned that task to actually stand up an office, the AIM-SOG, which I believe the name will likely change.
So it was called ATIP and now it's called AIM-SOG, and they're going to change the name of it again. I wonder why this is. I wonder if this is just a sort of a tactic that they use so that, you know, if you send an FOI for everything that AIM-SOG has, they say, well, you know, AIM-SOG only ran for 3 months and this is what we had. And then you've got another organisation and another organisation. They keep changing the name of it to deter people from putting in FOI requests. That's probably what it is. I don't think that's because they've got any alien spacecraft to hide. I think it's just because they find it tedious having to deal with all the conspiracy nuts.
But we have moved forward in terms of moving to establish that office. We have, as of this week, picked a director for that effort, a very established and accomplished individual. We've been
A very established and accomplished individual as a director for this AIM-SOG, or whatever it's going to be called, next week. They didn't name him. That's interesting, isn't it? Well, I wonder why he would say we've picked a director, a very accomplished individual, but not name him. That, I think, is a little odd. Okay, this guy seems to be running the show until the new director is put in place. Anyway, whether the director of AIM-SOG's actually probably going to have to report to this guy because he's a Under Secretary of Defence, I think, something like that. He's a fairly senior individual. So, yeah, so this director is going to be reporting to him. Now, I think it's quite interesting. Earlier in the piece, someone asked him if he was a science fiction fan, this guy, and he said, yeah, you know, he likes science fiction. He was brought up with, you know, the Apollo, the science fact of Apollo, and, you know, science fiction stuff. So he goes to conventions, he likes science fiction stuff. So I think that's a good thing. because it shows he's got an interest in it. He's not like Trump. You know, Trump's, it's just an irritation to Trump. He's not remotely interested in it. Whereas this guy at least has an interest in that sort of thing. I think that could only be a good thing. Okay, let's see what else we got. And I think it's worth actually listening to him say that he likes science fiction.
All by that, and I've taken that to heart. I enjoy the challenge of what may be out there. I have mentioned to you that, yes, I have followed science fiction. I have gone to conventions, even. I'll say it on the record. Got to break the ice somehow. But, you know, I have done that, right? But there's nothing wrong with that.
Of course there's nothing wrong with that. As I said earlier, it's a good thing.
Don't necessarily dress up, but I do...
Someone actually picked him up on that. It said it doesn't necessarily dress up, which means that probably sometimes he does go dressed up as Captain Kirk, or he wears his Star Trek uniform, or whatever. But again, yeah, nothing whatsoever wrong with that. I mean, if I was doing that job, you know, I have an interest in that sort of thing, and I think you need to be interested in that sort of thing to actually push this thing forward and ask the right questions.
You know, I do believe that it's important to show that the Department of Defense has, you know, we have character, and we're people just like you, just like the American people. We have our inquisitiveness. We have our questions. We want to know what's out there as much as you want to know what's out there.
I believe that, actually. I believe that. I certainly don't believe they've got any captured aliens or alien spacecraft. I honestly believe they do not know what this is.
We get the questions not just from you, we get it from family members. And we get them night and day, not just in committee hearings. So finding what's out there is important, but first and foremost, it's important for us to do that so that we can ensure that our people, our personnel, our aviators, our bases and installations are safe. And then that curiosity factor is something else that we just want to know, because that's the human race. It's just, you know, that insatiable desire to know.
Yep, he's absolutely right. And I think that's he's coming across as being completely sincere to me. I think he wants to know just as much as we do, is ET visiting Earth? There's no evidence of that. That's the problem. They want to see if there's any evidence of that. You know, so now they're asking for all these people to send in reports. They're not interested in civilian reports, but certainly from the military sources, you know, radar operators and pilots, they encourage them now to report this sort of thing, so they can try and figure out what it is. I think this is worth a quick look.
Propulsion. That's pretty intriguing. And if you're able to answer this in this setting, are we aware of any foreign adversary capable of moving objects without any discernible means of propulsion?
I think I would, without discernible means of propulsion, I would say that we're not aware of any adversary that can move an object without discernible means of propulsion.
Yes, but balloons will will move without a discernible mode of propulsion, won't they?
The question then becomes, in many of these cases where we don't have a discernible means of propulsion in the data that we have, in some cases there is likely sensor artifacts that may be hiding some of that. There's certainly some degree of something that looks like signature management that we have seen from some of these UAP.
It's interesting, signature management. Now, these conspiracy clowns, I was watching, what's his name, the pile of rubble guy, he likes looking at piles of rubble. Matthew Williams, I was looking at him, and he thought he had absolutely no idea what signature management is. He thought it was something to do with driving a car, you know. Driving a car, turning a steering wheel, that's the signature, and I'm managing it. And I thought, what is this guy? What a moron this bloke is. But signature management is making an object either disappear entirely or appear different to what it actually is, make make it look bigger, make it look smaller. That's signature management. It's got nothing whatsoever to do with driving cars.
But I would caution. I would simply say that there are a number of events in which we do not have an explanation. And there are a small handful in which there are flight characteristics or signature management that we can't explain with the data that we have. We'll continue. Those are obviously the ones that are of most interest to us. Earlier, when we asked about how you avoid technological surprise, the biggest way you avoid technological surprise is by collecting this type of data and by, importantly, calibrating the assumptions that you go into with how you do that analysis.
Yeah, so the part of the signature management is confusing other sensors. So if you want to confuse the enemy sensors with your signature management, it can't be a sort of a technological sort of jamming. If you know what the pulse repetition rate and all the frequency of the radar is and all this sort of stuff, you could make a countermeasure system that can make your device appear to be somewhere else in the radar sweep, or going faster than it actually is. By manipulating the Doppler shift. Well, you could simulate the Doppler shift on the radar or whatever. That sort of signature management is technical stuff.
I'll tell you, within the UAP task force, we have one basic assumption, and that is that generally speaking, our sensors operate as designed. And we make that assumption because many times these are multi-sensor collections. We make no assumptions about the origin of this or that there may or may not be some sort of technology that we don't understand. That's, I think, the key to avoiding technological surprises, by calibrating those assumptions.
And finally, with respect to the second two videos showing the small triangles, the hypothesis is that those are commercial drones that, because of the use of night vision goggles, appear like triangles. Is that the operating assessment?
Some type of drone, some type of unmanned aerial system, and it is simply that light source resolves itself through the night vision goggles onto the SLR camera as a triangle.
And have we, in order to prove that hypothesis, flown a drone and observed it with that same technology to see whether we can reproduce the effect?
UAP Task Force is aware of studies that have done that.
Yeah, okay. So they've said, okay, they've looked at the vision, they thought, well, that's interesting. What could it be? Well, it could be this. Let's recreate this, and they've recreated it, and they're happy that what it was just a run-of-the-mill UAV of some kind.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Dr. Winstrup.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here. My first question is, through this process where there's been sightings, have the sightings been stationary, or have they always been sighted from a moving object, from a plane or a ship that may be moving? Have these reports ever come from a stationary object being observed in the sky?
Yeah, that's a good question, because like the Tic Tac video, it's very easily debunked and easily proven that it's a slow-moving high object, not a low-moving fast object, and that effect is caused by the F-18 or whatever it was flying fast past something that's stationary or moving very slowly. That's a very good question. So it can give the impression that something that isn't moving is actually moving very fast if it's observed from a fast-moving aircraft or vehicle.
The UAP Task Force does have reports from a stationary observer.
There's a difference observing something when you're moving as well. It's physical.
Exactly, that's a very good question.
Right? That's why I asked that question. Are we capable, or have we made any breakthroughs, or anyone made any breakthroughs, to be able to cite something and make some determination at all of its composition, whether it's a solid or a gas? Is there any such capability?
That'll be for the closed session.
I'm not asking what, I'm just...
Right. From some of the returns, I mean, it's clear that that the majority, but it's clear that many of the observations we have are physical objects from the sensor data that we have.
Well, gas is a physical object. It can be, and so, and you see where I'm going with this. I'm trying to determine what it is we're looking at, so if we can decide if something is a solid or a gas, and if there have been any conclusion on its capabilities, like its capabilities of movement, of turning, going, 180 degrees or 90-degree turn, anything along that line that we've been able to determine.
And again, I should point out that that there is not a single explanation for UAP. There are a lot of different things that are unidentified aerial phenomena.
Basically, we really don't know much on that. That's all I'm trying to get. And I'm pleased that you have protocol right now for our military, but are there any non-military reports coming forward of similar events, or is it all coming from military?
The UAP Task Force has a very good working relationship with the FAA. They have a very good working relationship with other parts of the U.S. government so that we can ingest reports from...
Do we have any
those sources.
reports non-military?
Yes.
Thank you. That's my question. And do we need to put out protocol for civilians that may be in that arena, like through FAA? Do you think that would be appropriate and helpful?
I think standardized reporting, without a doubt, is key to helping us get to ascertain what some of these are.
I think it would be important as well. Do we, there are other people besides the U.S. that have had these experiences and reported them? Is that correct?
There are, that's correct.
Is it all of our allies, or is it allies and adversaries? What have we learned publicly?
So some of that, I think, sir, we'll save for closed session.
Well, that goes to my next question. Publicly, have others made anything which would not have to be considered closed? So I don't want you to answer what they've said necessarily.
Allies have seen these. China has established its own version of a UAP task force, so clearly a number of countries have observations of things
That's interesting.
in the airspace that they can identify.
And do we share data with some, with all? Are they sharing with us?
Well, with some, you would think, it would be pretty obvious.
We share data with some, and some share data with us.
But not necessarily all that have publicly reported something?
That's correct.
Okay. And I think that's an important thing, and for the other session, actually, that we don't discuss that now. Because,
Yeah, okay, this guy started off well, but his questions are getting weaker and weaker. See what else we've got. This is quite interesting as well. Sorry about the background noise if you can hear it. We've got a bit of a storm coming in this afternoon.
DoD contractors have managed after Project Blue Book ended and prior to ATIP beginning. Did anything also predate Project Blue Book?
So I can't speak to what may have predated Project Blue Book. I mean, of course, there's Roswell and all these other things that people have talked about over the years.
Yeah, I think they're not very interested in the really ancient stuff. He says, one of the guys, I'll try and get a clip, is asked the question, do we have any recovered biological material or, technology or whatever? And he says, no, we don't. So I think they've basically put a line through all that. They're not interested in all this ancient history. He's either not aware of Project Sign and Project Grudge that predated Project Blue Book, or they've said, okay, look, we've written all this old stuff off. There's nothing to it. There's zero evidence of any material being recovered, any aliens recovered. Roswell's, it's all nonsense. We're just going to start from the information that we can get now. This is supposedly happening on a regular basis. So we're going to sort out a nice, simple way for people from the military to report this, to record the sensor data, and all this sort of stuff. And we're going to look at that evidence and see what we can tell from that evidence. That's what they're interested in. They're not interested in all this historical nonsense.
I'm familiar with Blue Book. I'm familiar with ATIP. I haven't seen other documented studies. that have been done by DoD in that regard.
So you're not aware of anything in between Project Blue Book and ATIP?
Not aware of anything that's official that was done in between those two. Hasn't been brought to my attention.
Okay. Additionally, are you aware of any other DoD or DoD contract programs focused on UAPs from a technological engineering perspective? And by that I mean, are you aware of any technology initiatives focused on this topic other than initiatives focused on the individual case investigations?
I'm not aware of any contractual programs that are focused on anything related to this other than what we are doing in the Navy Task Force and what we are about to launch in terms of our effort.
Same question for you, Mr. Bray.
Same answer, not aware of anything outside what we are doing in the UAP task force.
So just to confirm, you're not aware of any technology or engineering resources that have been focused on these efforts besides what we've mentioned today?
Once again, I'll say no contractual or programmatic efforts that are involved. The reason why I qualify it that way, let me qualify it that way. I can't speak to what people may be looking at in the department. Somebody says, I'm looking at something that may be unidentified, and I can't speak to that. I speak to official programs that we have on the record.
It's also been reported that there have been UAP observed and interacting with and flying over sensitive military facilities, particularly, and not just ranges, but some facilities housing our strategic nuclear forces. One such incident allegedly occurred at Malmstrom Air Force Base, in which 10 of our nuclear ICBMs were rendered inoperable. At the same time, a glowing red orb was observed overhead. I'm not commenting on the accuracy of this. I'm simply asking you whether you're aware of it and whether you have any comment on the accuracy of that report.
Let me pass that to Mr. Bray. You've been looking at UAPs over the last 3 years.
That data is not within the holdings of the UAP task force.
Okay, but are you aware of the report, or that the data exists somewhere?
I have heard stories. I have not seen the official data on that.
So you've just seen informal stories, no official assessment that you've done or exists within DoD that you're aware of regarding the Malmstrom incident?
All I can speak to is, what's within my cognizance of the UAP task force, and we have not looked at that incident.
Well, I would say, it's a pretty high-profile incident. I don't claim to be an expert on this, but that's out there in the ether. You're the guys investigating it. I mean, who else is doing it?
If something was officially brought to our attention, we would look at it. There are many things that are out there in the ether that aren't officially brought to our attention.
So how would it have to be officially brought to your attention? I'm bringing it to your attention.
Sure. So,
this is pretty official.
Sure. So we'll go back and take a look at it, but generally there is some authoritative figure that says there is an incident that occurred. We'd like you to look at this. But in terms of just tracking what may be in the media that says that something occurred at this time, at this place, there are probably a lot of leads that we would have to follow up on. I don't think we have resources to do that right now.
Well, I don't claim to be an authoritative figure, but for what it's worth, I would like you to look into it. And
sure.
If for no other reason, you could dismiss it and say this is not worth wasting resources on. And then finally, are you aware of a
Okay, so they're going to. So after this meeting, they're going to go back and they're going to actually have a look at the report from the Malmstrom Air Force Base incident, where supposedly a UFO shut down a number of nuclear missiles, made them inoperable. Again, this happened a very long time ago. There's probably not much in the way of evidence. There's as far as I know, there's no pictures of this big glowing orb. I haven't seen any engineering information about how these things were shut down or anything. I can't really comment on that. But it may be that there was some sort of monumental cock-up someone made and accidentally shut the missiles down and hid that mistake by concocting this story. But again, it's a long time ago. These guys are interested in gathering evidence, and this is an ancient story, and the little I've seen on it, there's not much in the way of evidence with regard to that Malmstrom incident.
Document that appeared around 2019, sometimes called the Admiral Wilson Memo or EW Notes Memo?
I'm not.
You're not.
I'm not personally aware of that.
Okay. This is a document in which, again, I'm not commenting on the veracity. I was hoping you would help me with that, in which a former head of DIA claims to have had a conversation with the Dr. Eric Wilson and claims to have sort of been made aware of certain contractors or DoD programs that he tried to get fuller access to and was denied access to. So you're not aware of that?
I'm not aware, Congressman.
In my 10 seconds remaining, then I guess.
And again, you know, that's not really in the purview of this unidentified aerial phenomenon task force, is it? Because that's just one of the stories that's kicking around, and I think even Ben Emlyn Jones said, Eric Davis said that never happened. It was just nonsense. They just made it up, because that's the sort of thing the UFO. There's a lot of that in the UFO business. You know, it's all going cold. There's nothing happening, so people start inventing stuff, and you know, there's no evidence of, you know, unidentified aerial phenomena for them to look at in that story, so they wouldn't be interested in that story. It's just another story. I think the guy mentions the term self-serving. You know, when it comes to civilian UFO reporting, there's a lot of self-serving information put out there. What he means is people make shit up for money. That's a translation of that for you.
I just would ask, Mr. Chairman, unanimous consent to enter that memo into the record.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it.
Mr. Krishnamurthy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to both of you for appearing today and for your public service. First question is, there have been no collisions between any U.S. assets and one.
Now, this guy, I think, asks some of the best questions out of all of them. And it seems to be the Democrats. He's a Democrat, this guy. It seems to be the Democrats that are asking the good questions. Which, you know, according to Ben Emlyn Jones and some of the others, you need a Republican in there. But it's the Democrats that seem to be asking the better questions.
One of these UAPs, correct?
We haven't had a collision. We've had at least 11 near misses, though.
And maybe we'll talk about those 11 near misses or any place where there's close proximity. I assume, or tell me if I'm wrong, there's been no attempt, there's no communications or any kind of communication signals that emanate from those objects that we detected, correct?
That's correct.
And have we attempted to communicate with those objects?
No.
So we don't even put out a alert saying, you know, U.S. Identify yourself. You are, you know, within our flight path or something like that. We haven't said anything like that.
Yeah, well, assuming it was an alien spacecraft, it's unlikely they'd be using radio. They wouldn't know where to listen. They wouldn't know what channel or what frequency to listen on. So I couldn't hurt, I suppose, by saying, hey, alien spacecraft, you're in a military exercise zone on whatever frequency they use. But yeah, it's an interesting question, I think, that one.
Like that?
We've not put anything out like that. Generally speaking, you know, for example, in the video that we showed earlier, it appears to be something that is, you know, unmanned, appears to be something that may or may not be in controlled flight, and so we've not attempted any communication with that.
Okay, so, and I assume we've never discharged any armaments against a UAP, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so the Battle of Los Angeles, they didn't think they were discharging weapons at an alien spacecraft.
How about wreckage? Have we come across any wreckage of any kind of object that has now been examined by you?
The UAP task force doesn't have any wreckage that isn't explainable, that isn't consistent with being of terrestrial origin.
Do we have?
Yeah, okay. So they haven't recovered any wreckage that isn't consistent with being of terrestrial origin, which means there are no crashed UFOs. They have no ET material. They have no ET technology. They have no ET biology.
Do you have any sensors underwater to detect on submerged UAPs? Anything that is in the ocean or in the seas?
So I think that would be more appropriately addressed in closed session. So.
Okay. I think one of the biggest questions that I have is, we say with a lot of probability, we say they, quote unquote, probably do represent physical objects, close quote. When we say probably, is that because we cannot conclusively say that they are physical objects?
In the task force report, when I say probably represent physical objects, most of them represent physical objects. There could be some that are more of a meteorological phenomena, something like that, that may not be a physical object in the sense that most people think of something you go up and touch.
But the ones where you say most of them represent physical objects, can you say that they are definitely, like with 100% certainty, that they are physical objects?
I can say with certainty that a number of these are physical objects.
Okay, so we can't rule out that some of them may not be physical objects.
So, some certainly could be a sensor anomaly or something like that. Some could be.
Yeah.
Now, how about with regard to UAPs? We've talked about UAPs on training areas, but obviously there's some sensor bias. I would think we put sensors in training areas. How about with regard to non-training areas? Do we track what's in open source and what civilians and others have tracked? And have we found similarities to what they've observed in terms of UAPs in non-training areas to the ones that are in training areas?
The UAP task force has worked very hard to make sure the data set that we're working with is a data set that we have very good control over that data. So we have some partnerships with FAA so that we get some of that, so we get that reporting in. But if it comes to just open source reports or someone says that they saw something, that generally does not make it into our database.
So
Yes. And that is very wise. So when you get people like Tony Topping saying that they have these big black triangles hovering above their house on a regular basis, yet are unable to produce one single photograph, I just discard that as self-serving nonsense, basically.
So basically, it sounds like we have a good partnership with FAA, but apart from FAA, we don't have partnerships with other agencies or other entities that might be tracking so that we could enlarge our data set to make comparisons.
So we will. So that's the goal of this next effort will be to expand that relationship with the rest of government and the interagency. So we can understand what they're seeing, what we're seeing. We can correlate on each other's holdings.
Because I think, sorry to interrupt, but I think that we might have a bias right now going on with regard to just reporting on UAPs being in training areas when we don't really track what's happening elsewhere. Last question, have our encounters with UAPs altered the development of either our offensive or defensive capabilities or even our sensor capabilities?
Wait till after the closed session.
Yeah.
Okay.
No surprise there.
Mr. LaHood.
Probably one of the changes they'll make is rather than that they'll have optical cameras, I think, on some of the airborne platforms, so that when they see these objects in infrared, they can actually get an optical image of it rather than it just be a white blob or a black blob, depending on whether it's set for hot black or hot white. I think that, and probably on the ground too, or on the Navy assets, they'll have very high zoom, good quality optical cameras that they can bring to bear on any targets that will be close enough to the ships, for example. I think those sort of things is what they're going to be talking about in the closed session.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank the witnesses for being here today. Obviously, this topic of UAPs has attracted a lot of interest in people that are curious about this hearing today. As we talk about, and I would say there's a lot of what I would call amateur interest groups that are involved in the UAP field. My question is, when there are unsubstantiated claims or manufactured claims of UAPs or kind of false information that's put out there, what are the consequences for people that are involved with that or groups?
There'll be none, otherwise Greer and Dolan and Strieber, Corey Good, all these piffle peddlers would be in jail, wouldn't they?
Groups that are involved with that.
So one of the concerns that we have is that there are a lot of individuals and groups that are putting information out there that could be considered to be somewhat self-serving.
Yeah. That's a very nice way of saying there are a lot of individuals and groups out there that put out an awful lot of bullshit for money or for micro fame or for whatever. You can't trust these civilian groups, and you can't trust civilians. I mean, again, Ben Emlyn-Jones considers himself a serious investigator, yet he will stand by the Pentarch story, which is complete nonsense. And there's going to be a book about it, and the people that are writing the book know it's complete nonsense. It's self-serving rubbish. And, there's other stuff. There's loads of it. The UFO business is just full of it because it is a business. And that's just a very nice way of saying that you just can't believe what civilians tell you. They're piffle peddlers. They'll tell you anything for money or microfame. You can't trust them. Put a line through the civilian stories.
We're trying to do what's in the best interest of, one, the Department of Defense, and then two, what's in the best interest of the public, to ensure that we can put factual-based information back into the mainstream and back into the bloodstream of the reporting media that we have, so people want.
So the other thing too is that no recovered material that's not normal terrestrial stuff. That tells you that Corso's book was absolute rubbish. Tells you that Bigelow's stuff is absolute rubbish. And I might play a clip of Ben Emlyn-Jones going, "Oh, rubbish. What about that Bigelow aerospace stuff?" Well, Bigelow, I think, was dating Linda Moulton Howe at the time, wasn't he? And he gave her a sample of this stuff to get analysed. This stuff, he said, was recovered ET material, and it was analysed. Linda Moulton Howe said she had this ET material. She was going to get it analysed and publish the results, and the results came back that it was terrestrial industrial waste, and she refused to publish the results. So these are self-serving people. Linda Moulton Howe doesn't want you to know that it wasn't ET material. When the report came back that it was terrestrial industrial waste, she didn't want anyone to know about it. So you can put a line through Bigelow Aerospace, and you can put a line through Linda Moulton Howe. Again, this falls into the self-serving category. It's not fact, it's science fiction.
Understand what's there. It's important because we are attempting, as this hearing has drawn out, to understand, one, what may just be natural phenomenon, two, what may be sensor phenomenology or things that were happening with sensors, three, what may be legitimate counterintelligence threats to places that we have or bases or installations, or security threats to our platforms. And anything that diverts us off of what we have with the resources that have been allocated to us sends us off in these spurious chases and hunts that are just not helpful. And they also they also contribute to the undermining of the confidence that the Congress and the American people have that we are trying to get to the root cause of what's happening here, report on that, and then feed that back into our national security apparatus so we are able to protect the American people and our allies. So it is harmful, it is hurtful, but hopefully if we get more information out there, we'll start to lessen the impact of some of those spurious reports.
So just taking that a step further, that misinformation, false narratives, manufactured, so what are the consequences? Are there legal consequences? Are there examples that you can...
If only there were. That would be absolutely brilliant. Get rid of all the fog that's in the UFO business. Just get rid of all these bloody piffle peddlers. And let's separate the wheat from the chaff. That's what these people are trying to do. That's what they're tasked with doing.
Give us where people have been held accountable by this misinformation or disinformation.
I can't give you, any examples where somebody's been legally held liable for putting something out there, but
Well, I guess what's the deterrent from people engaging in this
There is none.
activity?
I don't know. I don't have that answer. That's something that welcome the dialogue with Congress to talk about that with the members who help legislate those laws to say what should be the legal ramifications that we could use to potentially hold individuals accountable, whether it be citizens or information that might be injected into our media by other forces or other countries, if you will.
And in terms of DOD's and review and analysis in this field, I mean, is there a standard in place when it comes to UAPs? I mean, is there any guidance you look to that's codified in law or otherwise within DOD that kind of sets out the standards for UAPs and what to look for?
I think that's part of what the group that we're standing up now will be charted to do. We're actually, from my organization, we'll be looking at policy and standards that we have to come to you and work with you to actually put in place and promulgate across our government.
Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Welch.
Thank you. I'm going to follow on the line of questions from Mr. LaHood. Gentlemen, what seems incredibly difficult for you is that there's two almost competing but different narratives. One is no one knows whether there's extraterrestrial life. It's a big universe, and it would be pretty presumptuous to have a hard and fast conclusion. And then if there is, it's not beyond the realm of possibility that there is some exploration coming here. And that underlies a lot of the reports you get. I think Mr. LaHood was asking about that. People think there must be extraterrestrial life, and it's not at all beyond the pale that there would be a visit here. On the other hand, as the DOD, you have the responsibility to make sure that our national security is protected, and that if there are surveillance drones or active drones that can disable our systems, that has to be analyzed, has to be stopped. So how do you divide how do you separate your responsibilities where you get all these reports from folks who maybe in good faith, maybe not, believe that you should be investigating every possible report of a extraterrestrial incident? I'll start with you, Mr. Moultrie.
Sure, indeed, Congressman, and thank you for the question. It's important that we, as a part of this effort, really build out the relationship that we have with others, including NASA, and for the reasons that you just pointed out. So there are elements in our government that are engaged in looking for life in other places, and they have been doing that for decades. Right? They've been searching for extraterrestrial life. There are astrobiologists who have been doing this too. We're a part of that same government, and so our goal is not to potentially cover up something if we were to find something. It's to understand what may be out there, examine what it may mean for us, if there are any, from a defense perspective, any national security implications or ramifications. But then to work with organizations as appropriate, if it's a weather phenomenology with NOAA, if it's a potential for extraterrestrial life or an indication of extraterrestrial life, with someone like NASA.
So the transparency actually is very important.
Completely.
For public consumption.
Completely.
But we're going to have a classified briefing, and without going into the details of what kinds of secrets that we can't share here, what is it? What are we protecting? I don't know if you can answer this question in this open forum, but in fact, your perception of what it is we have to quote protect.
So I think right now what's really important for us to protect is how we know certain things. So there are a lot of things that we know, whether it be about the thinking of other leaders around the world, the weapon systems that are being developed, or how we detect things that may be threats to us. Many of those things are the result of some of our most sensitive sources and methods. And we'll use those things not just for this effort, but those same sources and methods are used to help protect us from adversaries and from others who might mean to do us harm. There aren't separate UAP sensors. There's not a separate UAP processing computer. There's not a separate UAP dissemination chain or whatever. So it's the same process. It's just the same system that we have that helps us do all that. We need to protect that because this is something that we're looking at, but we're sure there are going to be other things that we'll look at in the future that will need those same sensors, will need those same sources and methods to help us do. So we're protecting the fact of that this nation has developed capabilities that enable us to know what may be threats to us and to counter those threats before they become something of a national issue.
Thank you very much. I want to thank both you, Mr. Bray, and you,
Makes perfect sense, doesn't it, really?
Mr. Moultrie, for your appearance today. I yield back.
Gentleman
It's an unusual term, yield back, isn't it? It's the first time I've heard that term.
yields back. Gentlemen, beyond videos, is there a range of other information that the executive branch has that would be valuable to the American people while protecting sources and methods, obviously? The details of individual encounters, including the time, place, and details of an encounter. And does the AIMSOG have a clear and repeatable process for considering public release as part of the process?
Chairman Carson,
And do you commit to building that process if it's not in place?
the UAP Task Force, the security classification guide that the UAP Task Force has been operating under that I approved really was meant to protect those sources and methods and meant to protect any knowledge that an adversary intelligence entity may gain from understanding what we're tracking, how we track it, or when we're tracking it, or if we're not. And so that has been an important piece in the balance between transparency and preserving our warfighting advantage, because the U.S. military does train as it would fight. What I will commit to is, at least for that material that's under my authority as the Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence, for information that we have when it does not involve sources and methods, and when we can, with a reasonable degree of confidence, determine that it does not pose a foreign intelligence or national security threat, and it's within my authority to do so, I commit to declassifying that. So I believe very much in the transparency of this, and we work very hard to balance that with our national security needs.
And I'll just add, Congressman, just over the last 3-4 months, I think that the intelligence community and the national defense apparatus have disclosed more information on various events than it has in probably the previous 10 years. You have our commitment to work closely with the Director of National Intelligence and others in the declassification and downgrading of intel apparatus to ensure that we can get whatever information that we can out to the American people and to the public writ large.
Greatly appreciated, sir. Ranking Member Crawford.
Yeah, well, that sounds pretty good, doesn't it? These guys, I think these guys mean what they're saying. I think they will declassify what they can. Well, I think we'll be getting to see what they can declassify. Well, the question would be really, if they determined that something was an alien spacecraft, would they feel comfortable declassifying that? That'd be a different question. So I don't think anybody asked them that question, which is a bit of a shame.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Stefanik is en route, I believe, just real quickly, but in the interim, if I could, if you'll indulge me, I just have a couple of real small questions. One is, do we have an example? Can you cite a specific example of an object that can't be explained as having been human-made or natural?
I mean, the example that I would say that is still unresolved, that I think everyone understands quite well, is the 2004 incident from Nimitz. We have data on that, and that simply remains unresolved. does not mean it resolves to being something, right, that is easily explainable or difficult to, or well, obviously it resolves to being something that is difficult to explain. But I can't point to something that definitively was not.
Bit of a worry that these guys couldn't determine that the Tic Tac was a balloon without too much difficulty. I think the average school kid could do that. That's rather disappointing.
Man-made, but I can point to a number of examples in which remain unresolved.
Gotcha. With regard to videos that have appeared in open source.
So what he's saying is that they've got no evidence of anything that's not man-made. They've got a couple of things that are difficult to explain, but they have no evidence of anything extraterrestrial.
Channels, for example, the Tic Tac video. Does AIMSOG maintain control of videos, and how do you prevent leaks of potentially classified videos or other material?
So the AIMSOG, as we establish an organization, we will have a process for classified and compartmented holdings, and we will find a way of getting positive control over those. We have our sensitive access program, the special access programs that allow us to put what we call SAPs around things, and then there's controlled access programs that allow us to put caps around things. So we'll have that in place. Our goal will be ensuring that we're sharing that with the appropriate analysts and the appropriate exploiters, if you will, who can look at that data too. What we don't want to do is bring something into a DoD database or a DoD holding and then have so many wrappers around it, it's not available to those who really need to look at it and to exploit it.
Well, that sounds good.
And that's one of the reasons.
Step in the right direction, definitely.
We're establishing relationships with the interagency, with the IC, and others to be able to do that, sir. But we will do our best to maintain positive control over the materials that we have within our holdings.
Thank you.
Chairman Schiff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just going back to the 2021 report, under the category of UAP appear to demonstrate advanced technology, those 18 incidents in which some of the UAP appear to remain stationary, winds aloft, move against the wind, maneuver abruptly, or move at considerable speed without discernible means of propulsion. It goes on to say, in a small number of cases, military aircraft systems processed radio frequency energy.
Now, this is interesting. In many cases, they processed radio frequency energy emanating from the objects. I think if it was ET, they wouldn't be using RF. They wouldn't be using radio frequency. I think they'd be using something far more advanced.
Associated with UAP sightings. I couldn't tell from that whether that small number of cases was a part of the subset of 18. That is, among the 18 which appeared to move with unusual pattern or flight characteristics, did some of those also emit radio frequency energy?
I would have to check with our UAP task force on that. I believe, without getting into specifics that we can do in the closed session, at least some that we have detected RF emissions from were not behaving oddly otherwise.
And the significance of...
Yeah, okay. So some of the objects that they've detected radio frequency energy from were not behaving oddly otherwise. That means they weren't, doing 90-degree turns, going up to space and then down to sea level. They were not behaving oddly. So their flight characteristics were not anything special. They're just run-of-the-mill drones, probably.
Measuring that radio frequency energy is what? That we suspect that this was some form of aircraft in which there were radio transmissions.
The biggest thing that you're looking for there is any indication of an effort to jam whatever sensors that we may have looking at it.
But I would also add to that radio frequency, as you know, Congressman, is used to control various platforms too. So the fact of emanations coming off of any platform, whether it be a UAV or another platform, could be radio frequency activity related to that entity transmitting out or something transmitting to that.
Yeah, so unlike a radio-controlled aircraft where you transmit to the radio-controlled aircraft and it carries out your commands, if you're lucky, some UAVs, maybe intelligence-gathering UAVs, would actually have a response to that. It would actually be a telemetry link as such, so you will be transmitting to the drone, but the drone would also be transmitting back to you. And that makes sense, really, because if it's an intelligence-gathering drone, the people that you're using it to spy on may detect it and destroy it. And if it just stored the information that it had gathered, you would lose that information. Whereas if it's got a telemetry link and it's beaming that information back to whoever owns the drone, they're getting all the intelligence on what frequencies are being used by the American military. What radar frequencies, what communication frequencies is there. FM inter-aircraft communications. Is it is it encrypted? Is it just open channel? What radar frequencies, what pulse repetition rates, what sort of stuff. All this sort of information can be gathered by these drones, and the enemy drone would want to get that information back to the enemy as quickly as possible in case the drone was lost. So that's the difference between. That's why you might get some RF coming off of these things. They may also have countermeasures on there, as he mentioned, where they'd be jamming the radar, testing the effectiveness of the jamming. They might jam the radar or use signature management and then monitor the communications between the military aircraft to see if they're to get some feedback with regard how effective their signature management is. They may say, somebody might say, I'm getting something on the radar and it's so and so degrees, bearing of so and so degrees, and they will know that that's not actually where it is. So they'll know how effective, or if it is where it is, ineffective their signature management system is.
Platform, and of course, we have a sensitivity with our airborne platforms of picking it up, which is one of the reasons that we try to prevent people from using their cell phones on airplanes and things like that. It's very sensitive to RF emanations. So that's a part of what we'll be looking at in the AIMSOG. What is this? Is this something that we can collect on?
I think it's safe to say if there are RF emanations coming from something, it's not going to be ET. It's going to be terrestrial, adversarial stuff, or top secret stuff whose effectiveness is being tested on the battle group.
And can we start to characterize the signaling environment around the emanations that may be coming off of some of these UAPs?
It'd be nice to know that they won't give the details, of course, in the open session, but it'd be nice to know what sort of frequencies and bandwidths and modes were being detected coming from these objects.
So that energy then that was recorded could be either an effort to jam, or it could be an effort to control a UAV, or any other communication with that craft.
I would say that's accurate.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. As the ODNI report makes clear, one possible explanation for UAPs is that we are detecting U.S. aircraft, either secret air programs or even test prototypes. I won't ask you in this setting, obviously, to describe any secret DoD programs. That said, I do want to make sure the U.S. government isn't chasing its own tail. Firstly, do you have a clear and repeatable process to check with compartmented programs about whether a UAP sighting is attributable to a U.S. aircraft? Secondly, does the AIMSOC staff have the clearances and read-ons that they need to investigate all of these incidents? And thirdly, when your staff cannot be read on, are your questions to those who are read on even being answered?
So I'll start, and then I'll pass that to Mr. Bray. So we're very conscious of the potential blue-on-blue issue or U.S.-on-U.S., and so we've established relationships with organizations and entities that are potentially flying or developing platforms for their own interests, if you will. And our goal is to continue, and we have a repeatable process. I think we've had that process for some time, to deconflict activities that we may have to ensure that we are not potentially reporting on something that may be a developmental platform or a U.S. operational platform that is performing either testing or performing a mission. So we will have that in place. We've already had those discussions with organizations and entities. We want to ensure that we're protecting their equities. We want to ensure that we're protecting their sources and methods while also getting at what we have here. We want to be able to deconflict those.
Absolutely. The UAP task force has had a process in place to work with other elements of the Department of Defense and other elements of the government to ensure that that there's as simple a way as possible to deconflict those. And when we reference that in the
Yeah, okay. So they're working on a process to deconflict those, which means they have had these conflicts before. So they have had it happen before.
in the report, I should say that we were simply accounting for the fact that there could possibly be one or two data points that had leaked through, but we were quite confident that was not the explanation.
How are you all liaisoning with Space Command? Specifically, how are you partnering with the parts of the U.S. Space Command responsible for space domain awareness? And how, if at all, are you partnering with the Space Force to analyze UAPs?
The UAP task force has a very good relationship with Space Force, as it does with the rest of the Department of Defense. We have pulled analysts in from Space Force to ensure that that we're availing ourselves of that expertise, as well as any other material they may have that would be helpful.
And Congressman, as you know, Space Force and Space Command, they have responsibility for space domain awareness. So what we've done, we coordinated with Space Force, we coordinated with their J2, and she is on board in terms of helping us plug into what they have and for us to have this interactive exchange of information and data. And we're doing that with all the services, so not just with Space Force or Space Command.
Sounds good.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, member. Any additional questions? All right, chairmanship. All right. With that, I want to thank you all for taking the time out.
Okay, so there we go. I think I didn't show all of it, but showed some bits that I thought might be reasonably interesting. I think I'll just finish up with a clip of one of the UFO fanboys, one of our favourite crackpots, Ben Emlyn-Jones, and his response to the fella saying they've got no ET material.
Quick glimpse of something in the distance, and it did.
Yeah, well, where would we be without a clip from our favourite crackpot, Ben Kremlin-Jones, great supporter of Mr. Putin at the moment, of course, or Mr. Putin, as I've seen it spelt on one or two videos on YouTube.
Behind it.
He's really got no idea. Lives in cloud cuckoo land, this guy.
Cloud. It's you could say, well, what was that? What's that? Look.
RT tells the truth, and there's a huge conspiracy. All the West, every single other media outlet is conspiring against the Russians. But RT is telling the truth.
Weird. And it could be that the fact that it was at a distance, you saw it for a fraction of a second and nicked behind a cloud, means you don't notice that it's like a buzzard or something.
We'll get to the UFO bit in a sec.
Or
I've just started this slightly early. Sorry, just a few seconds.
Right. Or a jumbo jet. And it's the circumstances in which you observed it, the very, very limited visual data you had on it, which is what makes it unidentified. However, if something is hovering right over your house, you can reach out and touch it, and it's a flying triangle or something. That's different.
Well, yes, but if something was hovering outside your house, a huge flying triangle, you could reach out and touch it. You'd have some pretty good photographs of it, wouldn't you? Because you'd pull your phone out of your pocket and go clickety, 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 clickety. No such photographs exist. So if anybody tells you there's a big black triangle hovering over their house, it's so close you could reach out and touch it, they're lying through their teeth. Well, it may be that they're lying past their tooth. You know, there might be someone that spends a lot of time on their veranda with their banjo.
That is something which defies explanation. It appears that Himes here understands that. Stephen Truthseeker says, Andrew Johnson says he's seen a UFO that looked like an insect. Well, if it's not,
Andrew Johnson, another crackpot. It probably was an insect. He's seen a UFO that was an insect. I mean, well, I guess Andrew Johnson's not an entomologist. He's not going to know every species of bug out there, is he? So he sees a bug he can't identify. It's not just a bug he can't identify, it's an alien spacecraft. God. Someone else forgotten to take their Thorazine.
not well. If you saw it, it's not an insect. It just maybe resembles one. Yeah.
And he's taking that seriously.
And Starlock says they've not reported the electronics of jet planes being affected. Some have, and now Fravor and the others didn't, but some have. Milton Torres did. Parvez Jafari did. It's an interesting thing, isn't it? Anyway, I'll let him carry on.
You say we can't explain. Give the public.
We'll take a break in a minute. I'll need to get another cup of tea.
Look, a little bit better sense of where on that spectrum of we can't explain we are. Are we holding materials, organic or inorganic, that we don't know about? Are we, picking up emanations that are something other than light or infrared that could be deemed to be communications? Give us a sense for what you mean when you say we can't explain.
Sure. When I say we can't explain, I mean exactly as you described there, that there is a lot of information, like the video that we showed, in which there's simply too little data to create a reasonable explanation. There are a small handful of cases in which we have more data that our analysis simply hasn't been able to fully pull together a picture of what happened. And those are the cases where we talk about where we see some indications of flight characteristics or signature management that are not what we had expected. When it comes to material that we have no material. We have detected no emanations within the UAP task force that would suggest it's anything non-terrestrial in origin.
That's bollocks.
Yeah, okay. So the question was, do you have any organic or non-organic material that you've analysed and found to be non-terrestrial? And he says no. Any material we've got has been found to be terrestrial material. And Ben Emlyn Jones, of course, has jumped on that and says that's bollocks. That's bollocks. Because he's a UFO fanboy and he's convinced himself, that Roswell's a true story and they've got recovered material from that, and there are other recovered crashed alien spacecraft, and there really aren't. It's all science fiction claptrap.
That's absolutely bollocks. I mean, no, maybe he's being a little bit crafty by saying we in the UAPTF haven't detected anything like this. But maybe
no, because that would be picked up later on. As this looks like it's going to become more and more transparent, and it would come back to bite him in the rear end if that was the case.
Maybe this is why they keep changing their name, so they can denounce things that happened in the past.
I said it, I think, previously in this video. I think they probably keep changing their name because they find dealing with members of the public submitting FOIs tedious, and they want to get away from having to deal with that.
Without, with a little, with a crossed fingers behind their back. The fact of the matter is, the ATIP, which is the UAPTF under another name in a different department, basically, all that happened was that ATIP sort of it picked up its offices from the DIA and moved over to the Pentagon, and changed its name. It's basically the same thing. And now it's AIMSOC, because maybe they've changed their name for the same reason. But the fact of the matter is, what about Bigelow Airspace and the work that they did with the materials?
Yeah, okay. Now, this is why no serious researcher would consider Ben Emlyn Jones a serious researcher, because it doesn't take very much research at all to show that Bigelow Aerospace and the material he was putting forward as ET material was actually terrestrial industrial waste. That's all it was. He gave a sample to Linda Moulton Howe because she said she could get it analysed. She gave it to someone to analyse it. She said she'd publish the results. When it came back as terrestrial industrial waste, she refused to publish the results because all these people want to maintain this bloody science fiction rubbish as truth. So the material they had was not extraterrestrial. It was terrestrial industrial waste. Very little research shows this to be true. Ben Emlyn Jones, being a UFO ET fanboy, grabs that story with both hands and runs with it as truth. That's why no one will ever consider you, Ben, a serious UFO ET investigator. Well, that and back in the Pentarch nonsense as well. As many other things, dog man, the Queen being a lizard. It's just ludicrous, No one is ever going to consider you a serious researcher.
Bob Bigelow was contracted to ATIP from 2007 to 2012 to study.
Yeah, and he was feeding them a lot of crap to get money out of them, basically. That's all that was going on there.
He had a whole hangar from materials which there was
no evidence of there being a whole hangar full of materials.
Studying, trying to identify. Dr. Irina Scott talks about this as well. Now, she was part of a completely separate project. But at the Battelle Memorial Institute, they were dealing with material which has isotopic ratio, which indicated doesn't come from planet Earth. And people were trying to dismiss it as meteorite. And he said, this isn't meteorite. This is a metallic alloy, and not one that's made in any forge that they know of.
Yeah, not overly familiar with this one, but if it was ET material, then it would have been squirreled away and analysed. You would think there's not going to be a woman on YouTube jumping up and down trying to melt it with a blow lamp or melt it in a forge because it has these different properties. It doesn't mean that it wasn't codged together on Earth in some kind of lab. Did it contain anything that's not on the periodic table? We haven't said that. So, yeah, I'd put a line through that. It can't be ET material. It just can't be, can it?
Dr. Scott was going all over the country looking for some kind of forge that could actually melt this stuff because it had such a high melting point.
Is there any evidence of samples of this material being handed to independent laboratories to carry out analysis on it? That's what I'd be asking. I mean, is it just one woman carrying a lump of stuff around saying, what do you make of this? It's meaningless, isn't it?
It was titanium. It was like things such as titanium and platinum and things like that. You know,
terrestrial substances, terrestrial materials.
You can't make these things. They're they would be very, very difficult to make in any kind of industry on Earth.
Well, not impossible, though, eh? And he wouldn't know anyway. He knows nothing about industrial chemistry. He's a dog walker. What do you know about industrial chemistry?
And Bigelow was involved in this too. This includes things such as...
Yeah, Bigelow started in business, in real estate. And we all know how much integrity real estate people have, don't we?
The implants people get, fragments possibly of crash retrievals, we don't know.
None of it, no evidence for any of this. No evidence for any implants being of extraterrestrial origin. I was watching something the other day, this guy on... I might actually have it on the TV. I might do a separate video. It's quite funny. Where this guy, the fellow that plays Spock in the latest Spock, Zach somebody, and he met this guy and he said, oh yeah, he said, I've got this implant in my toe, and they took it along and they had it removed and they had it analysed. It was a piece of dirt. So the guy had a piece of dirt embedded in his toe, where he'd been running around barefoot probably. Some years ago, and it's just remained stuck in his foot, and he's had it removed, and it's a piece of dirt. So there's an awful lot of nutters in this business. There's no evidence for alien implants whatsoever. No evidence that any of these grains of dirt, little bits of metal, or anything else that have been removed from these people claiming they're implants. No evidence to show they are anything other than run-of-the-mill materials. No evidence to show they are ET implants. Zero evidence is the bottom line.
And then he says, oh, no, we at the UAPTF don't know anything about that.
Well, they don't. They just put a line through that as science fiction rubbish, as I would.
Absolutely. I think that's, you have to classify as a downright lie, or he's just crossing his fingers and saying yes, but...
No, that's just your interpretation, Ben. Your interpretation. from the position of UFO ET fanboy who can't tell fact from fiction. All right, I think that'll do. Just a quick video. I think it had to be done really on this, whatever it was. I can't even remember what it was called, this thing. But hope you found it interesting. As always, thanks for watching, and maybe I'll catch you again.